Hi YouTube, we're here with the ASH26. Got a little jump start, pulling this cover off. This is the elevator servo, which is got a wire coming. It goes up front, obviously. And what we're going to be doing today is putting some LEDs on this plane, because it seems like I'm always up against the wire on flying this thing. And it's like negative 10 degrees today. So probably not going to be flying it today. I really want to fly it, but... So what we're doing, first of all, is I've got my little test station set up. And just so you guys know how I do this, I have access to these wires for the servos, which means that I will have access to the available power from the BEC, from the brown and the red line. Now that doesn't mean that you would have to take power here, but if you're planning on using power to run light strips like these from Turnigy or similar, then you're going to need to go straight off of a 3S voltage pack. You basically need 12 volts to run these. Now when your voltage gets low, you may see some dimming on these, but I've found that I can do a lot better with powering these things directly. Now my white wires, or excuse me, my white lights are going to consist of these GE. These are like an appliance light that's designed. It was actually off of a billboard, and I got just a bag of these things. My father-in-law had been charged with taking down a billboard for work, and so they just wanted it thrown away, and he said, hey, I bet my son-in-law would like those, and I did. It's quite the task taking them down to refine them into the LEDs that they can be. You guys see how small it is? It's insanely small. The board is about, I would say, 3 times as thick as the light. And I will take them from this scenario and I'll cut them up, just using different tools. This is one of them. And then I'll end up with these multi-layer boards, and I have to take and split this plastic off. It's quite a task. And then eventually I refine them down to this, which includes both cutting, grinding. You can see like on this one here, I can't even really point at it because it's too small. On this one here, where's my pin? There it is. On this one here, you can see how it's got kind of what looks like some damage on the bottom there. Yeah, the case is partially removed. It's not going to matter. And I'll show you why. That's why I have my rig running. This is running through an ESC that was went kaput. I forget if that's a E-Flight ESC or what it is, but either way, I'm just taking the positive and negative leads. Unless you're running a high voltage BEC, it's going to be 5 volts. It may be 5.5. Big difference. It's not going to make a big difference. So we'll take our black lead and our white lead, and the first thing I do once I refine these down to this stage is I go ahead and test them. Now these things are going to be quite bright. Of course we have a resistor. It doesn't even really matter as long as it's greater than a couple of ohms, because you need to create enough resistance you don't burn them out. I think this is a 100 ohm resistor, and on 5 volts you're not putting that much power through. It's a current limiting resistor, so the negative line receives the resistor in series with the negative terminal of the battery, in our case the BEC, okay, via the battery, okay. See how insanely bright that is? And just to prove to you, I'll hook this up in reverse polarity. You'll notice that the red flashing lights will momentarily stop. See? But nothing else breaks. Okay? So now we'll put it the right way. so bright, it blinds me. I always get that dark spot in your eye. Okay, so what we're doing with these 3 LEDs is, as you can see, they're so dinky. Okay, they're hard to control and handle, but that's exactly what I want. I don't want them to be even seen except the light that they emit. Okay, so one of these is going to go here, one's going to go here, and then one's going to go here. And I would really like them to wrap the corner. Okay, what do we have here? We have a little crash pad, the back wheel, you know. So sure, you could probably put this into the rudder, which I've done in the past, and it's actually about the right width that it would go right on the edge of the vertical surface there. The trouble is then you have to bridge your wire from the rudder to here. And while that wouldn't be a big deal, I'm not real keen to doing it here. The other thing is, you got to remember, I got a pull system, and I used electrical wire for that. So I could actually take this electrical wire, conduct positive and negative through that wire, and then basically, see, I can bridge onto my solder points. But then, of course, if you have a failure, it's just going to be super complicated. So instead, I decided I would just go ahead and tap my positive and negative wires. I'll just either drill one small hole or just chase those wires right up here and just color them or paint them or whatever, because you're only going to be talking about this little teeny wire here. The other thought I had was to use just both white and white so that it's very hard to see, as opposed to black and white, although black and white does make things easier. Now, as you can see, the configuration of these is going to call for having 3 in series potentially. And so that's the next thing, is for me to figure out if I can actually solder a small jumper and get those things to run as expected in series. There's a different current limiting resistor required for something like that, but we'll see. And that's what we're going to do next. So we just have to get a little bit of wire here. These things are available at Hobby King, and that's what these are. I should probably talk about that for just a second. This is what they look like when they come out of the package. Of course, I've labeled it as green with a G, and I've cut those off the strip. I don't like the waterproof ones unless, you know, that's where they're cheapest, because then I can take these off a lot easier, and I'll refine them down to something like this, where I've taken off a couple of the other LEDs. And then I do the exact same thing, but you can see how much bigger these are. They're a good twice the size. So I'll probably do double of those, if not triple. Probably not triple though, because triple is just a lot of work for one thing. Okay, so now I need a very short chunk of wire, and so I'm just going to look in here and see if I can. It'd be kind of cool if I could find the same exact wire I'm working with here, which this looks to be almost identical. I'm going to keep a pretty decent length on here. Just going to twist that up. Now these are live, so you'll want to kind of be careful about that if you decide to test things this way. You could also tape them down to the table if you're not sure of yourself, like if you're going to bump it or something. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as just a little chunk of solder, because I want to have a gap between these. That will allow me the ability to make my bend around the bottom of that airplane tail. This stuff is really not the easiest stuff to work with. These lights are so small. Guess I'm just going to scooch this out of the way for now. I think I might actually take and try to use a pair of pliers to bend a little 45-degree angle here. That worked great, guys. So you got a little 45-degree angle there. We're going to try something a little different here so you guys can watch along. So we're going to try it this way, guys, and see if you can see a little bit better. Try to zoom in a little bit for you. It's very difficult to capture this stuff. But I know this is always the sort of thing that people ask questions about. Okay, that's not going to work. Alright guys, let's try this. See if you can see. So basically, I'm going to take this wire and attempt to solder this LED, but a lot of times you have to hold them down somehow in order to make them stay put. It's quite tricky. So this one is attached now. So now I need to try to attach the first one to the second one. But if I just try to do this without the wire, then you'd have a heck of a time getting them to be able to bend around that contour of the tail. The trouble is, and you'll notice here in a second, is that when I solder that first one to the second one, because this is the middle one, it's going to want to release the first solder joint. And so I have to be very careful to try to get this job done as quick as possible. That's why I tinned everything first. Now these don't need to be lined up in that contour, but the closer you can get it, the better. Okay, so you see what I'm doing there? I'm just pushing those down. Okay, and I'll hold this one down. And that's not going to work. I gotta flatten it. And these things have lost a lot of their structural integrity because I removed the strength from the bottom. Okay, so now I have to try to do this without moving it. Very challenging. So it's either that or put some glue down, or maybe even a piece of tape. I might try to just hold them with forceps. If I can get away with it, that'd be awesome. The reason I'm going with forceps is because I have that bend. You'll notice I melted the plastic just a little bit behind it. That's okay with me. So we'll see if that's enough to make this work. Okay, now we've got the third one, but let's see if we can get these to light in series before we continue our efforts. So we'll just touch our black to the negative side and our white to the positive. Okay, so you'll notice it's lighting. See how they're flashing? They're actually on all the time, but they're just brighter in the absence of the flash of the other LED. Because then that's 4 LEDs in series. So what I can do is I can just eliminate that by detaching that from that rung on the breadboard there. So we'll try this again. So now we're just going straight through the resistor. It should be quite bright again. It's not quite bright. Okay? So now what we would do is we would just get a smaller resistor. I'm wondering if maybe the 3 in series is just a bad idea. Maybe it would be better to just try to do them in parallel like I usually do. Let me pause, I'll grab a resistor. Okay, so I put in a 10 ohm resistor. Watch this. See how dim that is? Now watch this. 10 ohms across 1. It's blinding again. It's blinding. It screws up the exposure on the camera. It's so bright. See that? It's like shooting a laser. So I think I'm going to have to do these in parallel. That's why we did this test. So now we'll go ahead and start making the maneuvers for that. I'll get these desoldered and come right back. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys, but you can see I've taken and marked the back side of these LEDs with a black mark, and that tells me which side's negative. So as I'm working, I can tell. So as I put these in parallel, they would be side by side, would be super easy. Just put all the negatives side by side and then solder the wires across. Now I say it's super easy, it's still a huge pain in the butt. So here's what I can do is I can leave this one piece soldered onto the end there, and that one piece that we soldered when we were putting them in series will still be helpful for us. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to take and use, so that's our positive side away from the solder joint there, and so this other positive side here, as you can see from the opposite of the black side there, we'll go ahead and lay that right next to that LED right there. And rather than trying to use a piece of wire, we might just try to get some solder glob between there. And that's gonna really be, I think, the easiest way on this application, but we'll see. Really quick, we'll see. They keep wanting to move, so we'll just try this. We'll just throw this tape down backward. It's just masking tape, nothing special there. We'll get our approximate gap and we'll just press it down a little bit. Whoops. Now this time you'll want to kind of get the approximate shape. And to be honest with you, if I keep having problems with this, I may end up just abandoning the 3 and going with 2. Because sometimes it's not worth the fight. Sometimes it is. In this case, I don't know that it would be worth it. The gap between them is just really not super critical. Okay, so the positive would be between these two now. So now I'm just going to push them down a little bit. A little extra pressure there. And seeing that gap is just making me think there's no way that's going to stay filled in, just because there's nowhere for the solder to go. So I'm going to go ahead and tin this little chunk of wire up. I'll try to do it on screen for you if we can. So we're just tinning that. And then we can go ahead and, well, we could also just put this there. Why don't we do that? So let's grab this and kind of fold it into a half loop. Okay. And that'll make the contact between those two LEDs, and then we can press down the rest of it so it kind of sticks approximately where we need it. Just remember, this is going to come off from the bottom of the wing and then up into the area where the servo was. Gosh, this soldering iron, the tip is getting pretty bad. Whoops, popped up. I figured that might happen. Now you might be thinking, this is pretty fragile, Brian. How is this going to hold up to the rigors of everyday life as an airplane? Well, that is a very good question. It probably will hold up as well as I put glue over it to hold it into one big position, or into one solid position. So that's kind of what we do. That's what I do when I'm trying to get these lights to stay intact over time. It's being kind of a pain in the neck, I can tell you that. Okay, I'm going to switch gears. We're going to try something a little bit different here. Okay, so I'm just trying something a little different here. I put my work up on top of a Blue Bunny ice cream container. We're going to see if we can get a better angle so that I can have an easier time doing this. Cleaning the soldering tip as we speak. Very difficult to manipulate such small surfaces. See, and then I made the mistake of thinking that that would be cooled. Well, there's not much of a heat sink here because we're up on a big plastic insulator now. Okay, so we're going to have to rethink that as to when we expect it to be cool. That's super convenient, isn't it? Just trying to pick up my wire. Not having good luck with this process today. Okay, so the negative side here, the negative side there. I guess I'm just going to kind of put these in the position where I want them again. The tape does really help, and the negative side all the way over here. We're going to try this in a different order again, because the first two have been a huge miserable failure. The other thing I could do is I could just put wires to each of them. That's totally the easiest way to do it. But as I've stated in the past, I've disconnected this. I'm going to go ahead and reattach my flashy red lights, because that helps me to know that the power's on. I'll unplug this real quick here. So, if my objective is to power these lights, I'll need to get power down to the first one. And I've got these short little wires that I'm going to use that will be long enough to reach up inside the wing. And what I'll need to do is I'll have to, at some point, have a wire that goes between each three. So let me get that going as well. You know what? I think I might just try to strip this back a little bit. like that. And that'll give me the wire I need to get to all 3 points. It's going to be this side, that side, and this side. Okay, so in the middle, I'll need it to dip down a little bit. Now this isn't tinned yet, so it's quite easy to bend. Okay, so just shaping that approximately the way I need to shape it. And then that needs to go to all 3 points. So we'll go ahead and make another bend here. And then just one more bend at the end. We'll just fold down the tip just a little bit. Okay. And that's going to go between those 3 pieces, hypothetically, without any problems. So, now that we have that in position, I need to relieve the pressure from the cable itself it's wanting to pull down. So I'll put the solder on top of this to hold it in position. I'm going to pull tight this tape so that it keeps tight and away from releasing. I'm going to clean the tip of my soldering iron. See, it tried to lift again, guys. I'm going to go get some tape. Okay, so I have a piece of tape now. This is just going to further reinforce my the places where I need this wire to be held down. I'm going to actually tape on top of my masking tape, so it's held from the top and the bottom. And that will hopefully give us enough holding strength to keep things where they need to belong while we're doing our soldering. Okay. Because I'm just getting real frustrated with having to move this stuff around so much. It's quite tacky, so it works pretty good for holding it down. It's just not working very good for my application. Okay, so we got the soldering iron. There we go. That worked. That appears to have worked. Now we just need to probably bend that out a little bit. And I am not real proud of that solder joint, but it is what it is. Now, I can take, and while that's still sitting there, I can test my power system before I continue, before I untape and unmask that. I'll get my little battery system plugged back in back here. I'm just going to reach this up here and I should be able to touch. Yep, working. And then this one, I'll have to peel up the tape a little bit. Okay, so I peeled up that tape to test this side here. Ooh, that one's shorting across the other side for some reason. So I have to make sure that I create a gap here. And that will resolve that problem. That's why we test it. Yeah, see how we're shorting there, guys? So now I can take and test this one. So very bright. Jeez, that blinds me every time I do it. Okay, so now I'm just going to peel this. So I just had to peel that tape out of the way there, guys. So that one's working. That one's working. And what is going on with this one? It's not turning on. Clearly it should be, so we've got something going on with the middle one. So let's try using a metallic surface like this blade. We're going to push down on that solder area and then heat and push. Heat and push. And that's all we're going to do. Then we're going to test again. These surface mount LEDs are ridiculous to work with. There we go. Okay, so it's working, and working. Alright, cool guys, we'll come back on the second part, and we'll pick this back up where we left off. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.